I'm your host Rupa Malhotra, and I'm pleased to be welcomed by two distinguished guests, Mr. Yashish Dahiya, co-founder and chairman of PB Fintech, and I'm also joined by Mr. Richard Ferranto, who is the CEO of Zurich Indonesia Life. Today we are talking about a topic which is complex, challenging, and something that hasn't been solved yet. We are talking about protection gap. But before we get into that, I would like Yashish and Richard, maybe I'll take you both back to when you started your career. And I think you both started in 2008 in the world of insurance. Maybe talk us a bit about your journey and at what point in your career did protection gap really hit you as an opportunity or a challenge? Maybe Yashish, you want to start with your background?
Sure. So if we start from the year 2008, we entered India. And at that time, for both term insurance and health insurance, less than 1% of the premium in the market was for these categories. At the same time, there was no social security for the middle class in India, and it was a growing middle class. And it was a crying need simply because, if people had death, disease, or disability, they had no financial recourse whatsoever, which led to, in a growing economy, with no social security, that leads to a lot of pain for the families. And we wondered why the people are not buying insurance, because that came very naturally that, you could have products like health insurance, term insurance, critical illness, etc. We realized the incentivization was not perhaps right. And we needed the consumers to become far more aware of which products are right for them. So we spent the last 15 years essentially educating people on the need, or at least the fact that insurance can be a tool in solving for these problems of, financial difficulty from death, disease, or disability. And we've had some level of success, a long way to go still.
And Yashish, was that back at 2008 and during that time, was it something, a report you read or something someone told you, a stat that kind of got you going?
No, it wasn't actually. Yeah. It was coming more from personal experiences, because I come from an army family. And so for the army, the healthcare and the pension was always covered. And I was the first person in my family who moved from a defense background into what we call a civilian background. And so the moment you moved into the civilian life, I used to always wonder, how do civilians manage to take care of healthcare costs, and how do they manage to take care of pensions? I also spent about 10 years working in the UK, which again had pretty good healthcare system. So it always baffled me how in India, people with no healthcare protection, no pension protection were going about their life. So it was a unique combination. I also come from, everybody in India comes from, in a way, somebody which was 2 generations ago, a joint family. So we understood how the joint family used to take care in such situations when one person died in an untimely manner, how the remaining part of the family used to pool in. But the joint family system was also going away. So I used to look at my cousins and I used to think, wait on, how are they going to handle this? And we had situations very early on when some colleague went through a difficult healthcare issue, and I saw firsthand what happened. First their car was sold and the house came on the line. And in some cases, it was very sad that, my own mother's sister, she is the wife of a retired professor. And that's not bad. But they had a certain amount of pension savings, and then the healthcare costs started hitting. She was found crying outside a temple because, how does she manage? So once a person gets hit by those healthcare costs, and in India, the healthcare costs are expanding because an evening in the hospital can cost you more than a 5-star hotel. And what that implies is about 25,000 rupees, which is almost like the annual savings of a middle class person going in 1-2 days. So it was very clear to me that the need was desperate, but at the same time, the infrastructure for selling these products was not there, or for educating the consumers was not there. So we had to put in that effort, and we are very glad we put in that effort, because that is what created both us and, to some extent, the term and health insurance industries.
Yeah, it's quite interesting the dynamics that you saw between when it wasn't a need in your background and then it came, I guess, and we'll touch a bit more on, because you talked about UK and what the system works there versus in India. But maybe very quickly, Richard, what about you? Like they say, right, people, professionals like us, no one plans to be in insurance. Like for you, what was that journey? Did you had that moment where this kind of hit you home as well?
Yep. Actually, my experience, my journey in the insurance industry started about around the same time, November 2020. That's when I just graduated from my second degree. Wasn't planning to come to the insurance industry as usual, and I think there is one figure who basically was the driving force to encourage me to come to this insurance, which is my late father. So he encouraged me to take this job, and I think unfortunately and sadly he wasn't around the day I started my job.
Oh, so sad.
So basically, I think aside from the sad story, while we're basically after the funeral, we took a look at the insurance policy. So the happy news is that he got 4 policies, but the bad news is he surrendered 3 of them while he was still living, because he felt that he didn't see much of a living value of the insurance policy, so he surrendered the policy. Then we only get 1 left to claim.
Yeah.
And I think soon as that, maybe I didn't feel that much, during the early part of my career, but I think soon as I come into this journey, I think, and look at how the industry is, how the society is also perceiving insurance, I think it's more of a calling for us as an industry here to really make insurance matters, and I think understood by people. And similar to what Yashish was telling about India, I think Indonesia is more like a similar society as well, where the breadwinners of the family look after the whole family financials, and even the extended family as well, if financially they wouldn't be able to, make ends meet. And at the same time, as well as the parents get old, these breadwinners tend to look after the parents as well on the financial. I think we just imagine that the unfortunate or sudden demise of this breadwinner would cause a big financial issue for the company, for the family. So I think it is the issue of the society, and I think it's quite reflective as well. Indonesia has got pretty okay financial literacy on insurance, 31%, but only half of that ended up buying insurance. So I think relating to the story of my father, who basically just see insurance, maybe he was the one creating the protection gap for himself. But I think that is also the issue that we gotta solve in the society.
So the awareness is there, but also it's not the depth of that insurance of that awareness is also not there, right? So it's interesting. I guess, I mean, both of you had personal stories, and I think we talk to people, and I think these personal stories come on this whole shows. I guess when you think about protection gap at a macro level, we see a lot of individual stories, but at a macro level, whose responsibility is it? Is it actually government's responsibility or the regulator, or it's the industry that's actually ultimately responsible? Because at a micro level, individuals, we keep hearing these stories, but it's been going for a long time, right? So I guess I'm just trying to understand in terms of the players in this whole protection gap, from your perspective, who is going to need to drive this forward, and why that's kind of being stuck?
It's a societal change. Eventually, it has to come from people, but people, like in everything, need to be encouraged. See, insurance is not a product where you get any instant gratification. And we human beings, if everybody, when they are born, knew they were going to die and said it's futile to live, life would be over. So I think we are optimists by nature. And so nobody believes that they would die in an untimely manner, or they would fall sick in an untimely manner. Or at least nobody wants that to happen to either themselves or anyone else. But statistically, it does happen. And I think it is too much to expect consumers alone. While I think it's eventually the consumer's duty to take care of themselves, but it's too much to expect the consumer alone to tread this entire gap. And that is precisely where governments and industry come together.
Yeah.
Industry, of course, has an interest, a commercial interest in insurance being a big part. So industry will do its bit. I think it's governments that have to think this through as well, because this is, at the end of it, a society thing. And if people in your country, see, the reason people in the European context have a certain life style and they can afford a certain amount of, lifestyle, if you would. That's the right
Standard
word.
Of living, yeah.
Standard of living in an unhindered manner is because they know that if the worst happens, then their families' education, healthcare, housing is taken care of. Those are the basic needs, basic human needs. Now, in a lot of the developing world, at least in India, the government doesn't yet have the financial resources for the entire country take care of at a good quality healthcare, education, and housing. And if you don't, then you have to somehow encourage people to do so.
Yeah.
At least at the quality level. And I think the middle class in all countries demands a certain quality which is expensive. But I think it needs to bring all parties together. I think governments need to encourage through not just tax SOPs, but also participation, etc. But it's not a very straightforward problem to solve. I don't think even in the next 10 years, people are going to be so mature that everybody will get up in the morning and make sure that they are, I'll give you an example, right? In the Netherlands, the moment a child is born, almost the first thing people buy is a funeral insurance. Because everybody who's born is eventually going to die. And there's a decent cost, almost 6,000 to 10,000 euros of a funeral. And the earlier you purchase it, the cheaper it is.
And they've taken emotion away from it just by
They've taken
making
emotion away from it.
Yeah.
It's just a very practical society.
Yeah.
But I think for a country like India to reach that point will probably take 50 years.
It's
Yeah.
probably the same with Indonesia as well, that some society might see it as a taboo, right, to talk about insurance, because then you talk about the potential demise or death of somebody or unfortunate events, right, going to the hospital. But as you rightly say, I think if that peace of mind is actually provided, that people wouldn't have to worry if somebody dies untimely or going to the hospital or having an accident, then I think only then the lifestyle, could be, they could enjoy a more better lifestyle unhindered.
And I also think, talking a bit about this government thing, I think we countries have a lot to learn from the experiences of the European context, because they are now struggling because they have given good quality healthcare to all. They are struggling with the cost of that. So I don't think the government taking 100% of the cost of healthcare is also right, because that creates different incentives. So somewhere this has to be a partnership between government, industry, and customers to make it successful and long-lasting. You don't want people to believe that this is for free and to be, just utilized and to be criticized. So it's crazy, right? I live in India and the UK. And if you ask most people about the national health NHS in the UK, most of them are like, it's not good. But it's actually very, very good quality. Like when I go from India, it's better than most hospitals, and it's great care. So I'm like, are you guys serious? Like, wake up. See how privileged you are, right? But as an early stage society, we can learn from that. And we can say, okay, this is not the way we want to go, because that will also cause dissonance.
And in that, Indonesia the government has some, just on topic of health, Richard, Indonesia does have some universal healthcare, right? So where do you see kind of parallels to what Yashish was talking about?
The universal healthcare or the social security system in Indonesia was introduced a couple years ago. It was actually running well. It has a clinical path as well, which actually helps the wider part of the society. I think to some people who are educated already, the clinical path could be seen as a bit of a burden. But that wouldn't stop them to afford for the better insurance. But I think for the middle income or the low income, this is proven to be helpful. But as Yashish said, I think both the government and the society and the industry would have to go into this learning curve and adjust the approach along the way as the literacy goes up.
Yeah.
Because when the literacy goes up, that's where people would be okay paying this out of their own pocket, of a co-payment. Because before that actually happens, before the literacy happens, increase, I feel like people would just feel like, oh yeah, this is the gift from my government, then that will actually help me to live the lifestyle I want unhindered, while my health is actually getting looked after. So I feel like all the government, the industry, and the society would have to go into this learning curve together. And let's not forget that there's an emergence of technology, centralized data. I think we got to take advantage of that in order to actually help the industry as well to perform a lot more efficiently on this matter.
Yeah. So just on a couple of topics here, right, that come. One is, of course, we've spoken about the need for customer awareness as well. And then on the other side, I think the government needs to look at incentives. So first on the, just on the customer awareness level, if you go a bit deeper, I know, Yashish, you talk a lot about it in terms of, how Policy Bazaar have been really pushing in terms of, the awareness levels of it. And so I kind of just to have a very fundamental question that we all talk about insurance awareness. Do you think it's something that needs to be almost taught why is it not something taught? Like we say the same for financial, like is that we are not solving it at the ground level? Like we are now probably introducing the industry players to introduce insurance and are also tackle with customer behavior, etc. The example that you took from Netherlands, where it's like, it's right at the start. Shouldn't this insurance be a part of education curriculum?
I totally agree. I think it's a great idea that sometime late in school life, like they have moral science and many other sciences that are taught, insurance is also taught. Basically, protection against death, disease, disability, children's education, and longevity, pensions. I think it's a very, because that's how a lot of us evolved. I remember moral science. You would say, why do you need to learn moral science? But we had a moral science course which basically taught us the rights and wrongs of, and some of us learned a little bit of that at least. And this would also change. I think it's a brilliant idea if governments could at least introduce a course somewhere in the 8th standard, 9th standard, which covers insurance so that people in society have a broader sense of it.
I completely agree. I think in Indonesia, the financial planning was actually taught only in the university. I think if we start earlier in the years, then people would be a lot more aware. And I think we shouldn't also underestimate the power of the internet, specifically for Indonesia. Indonesia have got 275 million populations. 210 of them are actually internet users, and we have 160 million of social media. So that basically a media on its own to provide the education. I believe that the government, the industry should take advantage of that to educate the society about the importance of insurance. And Indonesia is also pretty unique. 2 out of 3 people in Indonesia are actually already or going to enter the productive age in 2 years' time. So those are the times where the insurance need is gonna be a lot more pressing for them, because they start earning income. They probably would start a new family. Some of the parents might also depend on them because they're too old already. So I think all this ecosystem the information and the technology would be, I think, would be crucial in terms of educating this, not only in the formal education system.
Yeah, that's right. So we need more TikTok videos and Instagram reels. But
I also think governments can do another thing.
yeah,
There is across the world, there's a lot of distrust for the insurance industry. And many a times, governments want to help bridge that. So let me give you a very simple example, right? Suppose we run an advert that says, look, somebody died and their family didn't have protection and they had to go through difficulty. That would be derided in many quarters that, oh, you're talking about death, you're talking about fear, this is fear mongering, etc., etc. I think that is where the most trusted entity anywhere is the government. And if governments stepped in and said, listen, it is good if somebody at least is spending money in this direction and trying to educate you on something you don't want to hear, there's nothing wrong with it.
yeah,
I think that societal change can also be driven very well if the government supports it. See, there are two ways the government can do this, right? Either government can come and say, okay, I have my own portal, come and buy there. Or it can say, listen, what everybody in the insurance industry is saying is not bad. Have a higher level of trust. The government saying so can create a higher level of trust. I think education is one. And I think that because eventually people are trying to address a problem, I say, in this matter, mostly the consumer is his own biggest enemy. Because of his lack of knowledge, he keeps buying products which are not great for him or her. And through that, eventually dissatisfaction comes.
yeah,
Right? Eventually they need to, I was speaking with Richard earlier. He said the, claims costs are going up because hospitals are doing. The consumer needs to realize he's not cheating anybody. He's cheating himself. Because that's what leads to that product not being available to his children, his family, his friends, and maybe to himself one day.
yeah. I think that's a important one because also I think from there is one around, of course, for the greater good, the protection gap shouldn't exist, but there's also around the challenge that industry as insurance players will have around fraud and that seeps into, and that kind of it's one step forward, two step backwards sometimes because these are systemic issues that exist. Is that something again in maybe first Indonesia, Richard, is that you think as also a cause of concern and maybe through technology, etc., that we can kind of go through that?
It is certainly.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, as the society gets more educated, the information is more accessible. We're seeing also a rise, I think, 50 times in terms of the number of claims that goes into the regulator with regards to insurance. And the common issues is actually difficult to claim. The customer doesn't understand what they're buying. And some of the agents are also not telling the customer everything about the policies. So those are the common issues. And I think that leads to the protection gap. That leads to the people also surrendering the policy much earlier, relating to my father's story, that people were not told the exact benefit of the insurance, or maybe they were put in a position where the insurance is compulsory. For example, in the case where when you're taking a credit from the bank. So I think this is where we need to play a part as well. The government would have to put the right kind of a regulation and the rule of engagement for the industry to engage the customer. And B, I think as an industry as well, my belief is that I think we probably would have to shift right now to be a lot more process or journey centric, because insurance can be painful to be bought. I think we need to make insurance to be really easy and to be easy to buy, easy to love, for example, and I think easy to claim. And it's all about making the purchase journey and the claim journey relevant for the customer. I think some customer who are not technology literate, then we need to put a process that actually suits them, yet efficient as well for the company, as opposed to people who are financial literate. They could access different kind of a financial service. then maybe embedding the insurance in the journey and giving them the right kind of explanation why would actually matter than just like manufacturing a product. I think that's where one big gap that I see in the industry right now, that the industry player would have to go just beyond manufacturing product, but I think creating the right kind of a journey for the society.
Yeah, and I think Yashish, you guys work with a lot of insurers as well from platform, and what Richard was talking about, digital or omnichannel, that's also seeps in. But is that, you think, is something going to kind of elevate some of the challenges around fraud or claims experience? And
I think first of all, digital has a huge advantage in products like health insurance and life insurance, simply because the disclosure at least is coming directly from the consumer, who is the one who's going to receive the claim. So at least the incentives are somewhat aligned, because the person knows that if they have made a false disclosure, they may not get a claim. So I think having some footprint of disclosure digitally is very critical. However, from a conversion perspective, see, it's very simple. If I know that in any product, whether I'm selling a financial product to you, whether I'm selling an ice cream to you, or whatever I'm selling to you, once I know you are somebody who's looking to buy, what is my best case scenario? My best case scenario is to have a physical meeting with you. And if I cannot get that, maybe speak on the video with you. And if I cannot get that, maybe have a call with you. And if I cannot get that, also maybe have a WhatsApp chat with you. And if I cannot get that also, then maybe I send some emails to you, some documents, because my job is to sell to you and get the sale out of you, right? And that's a difficult process. And so my point is, let's say a website receives millions of visitors. And this is something that across the insurtech world, we have somewhere got wrong as far as health and life is concerned. I agree with mandatory products, because mandatory products have a date by which you need to purchase. Motor insurance, international travel insurance, there we should go fully digital. But in the other products, actually, phygital is the only way. Because actually, all we want is with those millions of visitors, I would prefer to meet each one of them, if I could. Right? Yeah. Because that is the quality of interaction, and the total sales output would be much higher. And that would also imply that the insurance protection gap would be getting covered much quicker, because it's hard for a consumer to take, let's say in the Indian context, if I talk even in dollar terms, a couple of $100 out of his pocket and give it to somebody in the hope that they never see that product again, because nobody really wants to go through a claim to so it's, and I think there needs to be a broader understanding that this is a hard activity, right? It's not an easy activity, because many a times I see people saying the insurance industry is being too aggressive, or X is so much. Well, if it is that attractive, then why is it not growing faster?
Yeah.
Right? If it's that attractive, it should be a runaway success, right? So industry takes time to grow, and it's a lot of effort. And I would rather that the other parties, if they can encourage through tax SOPs, through participation, do that. If you cannot encourage, at least not discourage.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, I think, so while I think we're talking about protection gap, and I think we've spoken a lot about life and health, just a broader perspective of, there's also around, of course, businesses have their protection gap as well. And we are seeing now emerging risk. Climate risk is becoming a big challenge. There's cyber, which is also a bit unknown. They're hard to quantify as well at times in terms of what those gaps are. So, I mean, if you are kind of sitting in a position, say you're the government, or you're kind of talking and thinking with the regulator, just from what should be the priority when we think about, because again, this is unlike some financial products, insurance risk, there's multiple risk, right? So let me put it this way. So if you're a regulator or government body, what should you prioritize? And also maybe another one, if you are a consumer, what should you prioritize from a protection gap point of view to make it practical? Like, there's limited resources. And
see, when I think, again, from an Indian context, unless it's in one way or the other mandated, people do not really insure assets. Motor insurances, that's the reality we face, right? If motor insurance is compulsory, it will be bought. If it is not compulsory, it'll go down. But at least there's a view that it happens on an annual basis. I think home insurance, most people do not buy home insurance.
Yeah.
And unless somehow the society or something says it's mandated, getting people to understand that, look, there is a genuine cyber risk. It could happen to you. And also many a times, it's just a very, very tough process. And it takes a lot of cost from the supplier side. I think embedded is one way to go. If you can get access that way, then that's great. I think building up for asset sales through consumer inbound without mandation is hard, what I've realized.
I mean, in Indonesia, for example, a motor example, it's not mandatory yet. So you kind of see very different behavior to, let's say, in India, right? So I think that's a...
What is the percentage of vehicles that would be insured on a own damage basis in Indonesia? I know that's not your area, but still.
On the own damage, I think it's very, very, very small. Most of it is actually on the total loss insured. Majority of the insurance would actually come with the car purchase, less to the less extent for the motor purchase. And Indonesia actually is selling like tens of millions of two-wheelers on a yearly basis. And I think the vehicle goes on a 1 to 2 million purchase per year. So I think it's still a challenge for people to get that. But what is interesting though about the psychology of people in Indonesia is that I think they probably would have better awareness of insuring their assets like motor or car, because they feel like for the middle class society, those are their productive assets for them to do business, for them to do the activities, and they tend to insure them. And house is probably next, maybe to the least extent. If they still live in their parents' house, maybe that wouldn't really matter. And then life and health would actually come last, right? And I think the fact that the government is providing the social security, it's basically bringing the priority even lower. So that's why I think people are not gonna wake up in the morning buying insurance, especially life. That's where I think we need to work with the government, in order to actually create this awareness, continue educating. In addition to this moto and the two-wheeler and four-wheelers, right?
I also think we need consumers to be involved in the journey. In the sense, there are consumers who have been having foresight and have bought insurance and have benefited from it. See, there's nothing like a consumer who has benefited from having purchased a kind of insurance, whether it's a small or medium enterprise. I think getting them, instead of us as insurers or insurance entities saying buy insurance, those consumers come forward and say, look, I bought insurance and I had this difficulty, and I know you believe it would ever happen to you, and I wish it doesn't, but it does happen, like it happened to me. And because I had insurance, I got this benefit. Otherwise, my situation would have been very different. I think that is perhaps a way in which people could realize that, look, it has benefited somebody. So maybe I should have that. Otherwise, I agree. We go about life without hoping that, nothing bad happens. When we get up in the morning and drive our car, we don't think it's going to get punctured on the way. Sometimes punctures happen. It's just a very simple thing, right? So events happen. And I think just the realization that it happens to somebody else who's like me. Because we see in the Indian context, when do people buy health insurance or life insurance? Because that is not mandated at all, of course. It's usually when a colleague, a friend, a family, some event has happened. And that is what tells them, oh my God, this happened to so-and-so. So I can't be that different. And maybe I need to think about this because I saw what the family went through in terms of difficulty or advantage if they had the protection. So I think those stories, bringing them out and making them real is very critical.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot around governments. I think everyone has a part to play, and I guess that's what I'm saying. Maybe just shifting gear towards the last leg of it. Where from now, in terms of if you both kind of had 2008 to now 15 years. 15 years later, where do you see a different industry, and is it emerging new business models, or it will be more about the awareness and government kind of coming up with incentives or more funding and making mandatory? Is there beyond the things that we spoke about? Do you think in 15 years or so there'll be new business models emerging as well?
So if I talk about 2008, India's percentage of premium going towards health and term put together as fresh business was about 1%. Today it's about 15%. So it's clearly grown. If I was to look 15 years ahead, I think it would be 30 to 40%. So there was always this concern in the insurance industry that why should we do protection? It's so small, right? And if you really think about it, most of the general insurance industry in India did not participate on the health side.
Yeah.
It is mostly the specialist health insurance companies who had nothing else to do to some extent because they could not get excited about motor or anything else, that they focused on health. And even the term side, very few companies actually did anything on the term side, right? But it's becoming a larger and larger part, and a larger and larger part of the profit pool as well, because it has higher profitability compared to the other product. So it's taken time. I think it'll take further time. And I think as consumer education awareness increases, what people really need coverage for is pensions, child education cost planning, but today if I look at in India, a bulk of the investment that's happening is for returns.
Yeah.
5-year return, 10-year return. For that, you have the stock market and the banks. For that, you don't need insurance. Right. And I think the reason I mention that is I think we as an insurance industry need to somewhere internalize that, because otherwise we are standing on a wrong leg, and that leg will cause distrust, because eventually we may be able to sell those products, but the same customers will be disillusioned. When 5 years later they say, hey, you know what actually happened versus what happened in the market or what happened on the fixed deposit side. And that disillusionment will lead to them not interacting with the insurance industry much. Now, one can be Machiavellian about it and say, how does it matter to me? I would have progressed.
Yeah.
I think that is, and governments have a role to play here. So I've always been suggesting to the government that have differential taxation for the protection part, have unlimited tax breaks, actually have today when you go and take a pension plan, governments come out and support a little bit, right? You put in 12%, the company will put in another 12. In India, you have this rule. So why can't we have similar rules here that, when you put in money, the government not just breaks your tax, but also puts in further money to enhance and advance your activation on that side, which would lead to good case studies and which will lead to higher trust.
Yeah.
The second part is on trust. You've also got to control the hospital side, because otherwise they've got very high bills. The hospital somehow, everybody sees insurance company as money bags. That is not true. The insurance company is a holder of people's money, right? And I think that education is also necessary. But that we cannot say. That the government has to say. That listen, these insurance entities you see, they are actually holding your money. So, if you damage them, you're damaging yourself. Yeah,
I think, and maybe with more technology coming in terms of centralized database, etc., that probably promote the right thing as well. Richard, from your perspective, 15 years ahead, looking ahead, what's your view? Where do you think some systemic changes can happen?
Well, Indonesia has got a long way to go. I think we got a growing population, low penetration, 2.27%. And we got a couple of licenses as well in the country. I think there's 150 of them, right, including the general. So there's a lot of operator, and I think it's there's a increased number of digital player as well. But I think I agree with Yashish that the whole ecosystem would have to play a part. Government, I think, realized they started to regulate, and I think they're basically helping to put more protection to the customer, because the industry in the last 15, 20 years has been orientated around selling the saving and accumulation product from insurance. And that is not the right kind of a start you want if you want to protect the society, right? Buying protection for your family. But that actually has gone a bit to the wrong way in the last couple of years. I think until the government steps in and then regulate the sales, regulate the product. So right now we're seeing a bit of a rise in the protection pure risk product in Indonesia, which is good. And I think we gotta keep building from here. And we from life industry we need to learn what's the general or PNC industry doing best in terms of embedding the insurance. Maybe that's a function of that to the rise of the motor vehicle insurance. We got to start working with the ecosystem as well, the bank, the lenders, and I think some society as well. Indonesia has got a lot of small credit union. So if we borrow money, that's a risk attached to it if you're not around. We should find a way to go there. And I think we should harness the power of technology and data center or repository to actually help to increase our reach of the insurance to the society.
Yeah.
Because mind you that 80% of the physical presence of the Indonesian life insurance company today, only in 3 main islands. And Indonesia got tens of thousands of islands. And 90% of the premium is only coming in the top 7 provinces, while Indonesia has got 30 over provinces. So certainly we need to harness this power of technology, digitization to actually increase our reach and range. And I think just to talk about on the hospital side, I completely agree. I think there has to be some central repository data in a similar fashion like where the bank has a central repository for the lender, for the people who borrow money, right? And then you can check. I think insurance will need to do that so we can have a more steady and healthy insurance. So I'm quite optimistic that I think if the government, the industry, and also the ecosystem sort of come together and work with each other, with the regulation that's right now, put a lot more customer centricity into it, we can increase our penetration in the coming years, and hopefully, I think, closing more protection gaps.
Okay, wonderful. I think on that note, that then let's wrap up. But I think what we have seen is there's a lot that needs to be done. The governments need to come with smarter solutions, as you both discussed. The insurance industry need to prioritize the right products. From protection, product needs to take front and center and work with the industry. And of course, there's a lot of digitization and ecosystem play that will ensure the access is there. And then, of course, on consumer awareness, that's probably, I think, the key along with it, because if that doesn't happen, the demand side will get stuck. So we're hoping for the next 15 years, we'll probably see where the industry goes. But thank you so much, Yashish. Pleasure to have you here, and Richard as well. Thank you for your time and your insights. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Be insured.